Welcome to Abide in Liberty, a podcast empowering patriots everywhere to re-enthrone faith, family, and freedom as the bedrock pillars of liberty in education, our communities, and our nation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back for this week's Abide in Liberty episode. This is part 5 and the last part of our series on No Screen November, and summarizing all of the things, or at least some of the things that we've learned from this magnificent book, Reset Your Child's Brain by Victoria Dunkley. We're not affiliated in any way. We get nothing from recommending her other than our lives have been blessed, and we're seeing the lives of dozens of school-age children that we have stewardship for improving dramatically. So, if this is your first time jumping in, please go back to the first part in this series and listen from there sequentially. Everything that we talk about builds on the prior week, so you may be very confused by this conversation if you're jumping in right now. Today, we're going to address some concerns, some common concerns that you may have had or that parents have had before in relation to this screen reset and in creating a new family culture around screens. And then we wanted to finish this series by talking about some good house rules to keep in mind to help manage screen time on a long-term basis, as well as the way that technology is being misused in schools across the country and some of the impacts those are having, so that you can either push for change in your own school, or if you happen to be homeschooled, make some of these changes yourself, because you have a very small board of directors to work with at that point to implement any change that you want to make. So, first concern: my kid's dream is to work on computers. How in the world are they going to learn those skills without taking the time to learn them while they're kids?
I would say that's wonderful. I bet technology is going to have changed a lot in 5 or 10 years or however long it is. Maybe they're 17, maybe they're 18, and they're going to be entering the workforce by the time they finish college. And that's not going to take very long. Things are still going to be different. And everything that has to do with computers is meant to be learned fairly quickly. Not everything, I suppose, but there's a lot of, I know there's a big push for coding and things like that. They're going to be able to learn those things fast. Mm-hmm. I know people that have gone from knowing nothing about computers to who go and do extensive coding, and they do it in a matter of months. So the life skills that they're developing right now with how to write a good paper, how to, reading, writing, arithmetic, those important skills that truly do take years to develop and years to master, those are the things they need to be focusing on right now.
There's kind of an interesting trend in the country. It's no secret that the American education system is falling further and further behind the rest of the world. And we seem to think that the way to fix that is to push reading younger and younger, right? If we can have flashcards up when they exit the womb and start drilling them on letter sounds, that's the best way to get them ready to read. And it's simply not true. It's not true for reading. It's not true for writing.
You are not respecting the human brain is what you are doing. Right. You are not respecting the human brain and the natural development of that human brain. And you need to respect it. If you want that brain to learn something younger than is physiologically possible, I'm sorry, you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. And that's just not okay. Or if you do succeed, you're succeeding in a false way, not in the true way that the brain was actually meant to develop.
Yep. And if you learn how to code as a kid at the cost of being irritable, not knowing how to interact socially with people, not being able to learn mathematics because you're constantly distracted and your nervous system is hyperstimulated and hyper-aroused, you're creating a point where they may be able to graduate high school coding, but they're not going to have the life skills to hold down a job and implement those skills in the way that they need to. Whereas if you teach them to be a fully developed, well-regulated, responsible, clear-thinking, human, adult person, then they can learn that stuff and they're going to be fine. There's nothing to worry about. There's no rush to go learn coding right now. But if
they learn self-mastery and how to stay focused, mm-hmm. and they can really hone in and learn that really fast because they've learned some of those other really important skills,
Well, and I want
You're
you to
gonna
know,
be
so
fine.
I learned coding when I was working in an accounts payable job and I wanted to automate some spreadsheets. So I picked up a book and learned how to do it, learned the Visual Basic for applications, and then implemented it. Or I did use articles on Google that I would search up. But the kid coding mechanisms are all packaged as games. You have Minecraft where you can code. So is Minecraft really trying to get kids to code, or are they trying to get them to play Minecraft? Are they really trying to get them to learn coding, or are they really trying to get them hooked into Roblox? There's a reason why these tend to come packaged with games that are incredibly addictive. So anyways, I think enough on that.
Yeah.
Your kids are going to be fine. If they want to work in computer science or become a rocket scientist, they will be much better rocket scientists if they never touch a computer as kids than they will be if they grow up trying to code as they're playing Minecraft or whatever else is going on. What happens if I have all these rules and restrictions in place, but then my kid gets old enough, moves out of the house, and I can't control it anymore?
And we hope we've done enough.
I guess it's just the way it is always.
And that's just
right?
the way it is, right? This is the way it is with everything. We hope that we've done enough to help to send them out into the world. We've armed them with enough information that they'll be able to be a contributing member of society, and that they're going to have a lasting, to be able to develop long-lasting relationships. That's what we hope. We hope we've done enough. And we hope that we've developed a relationship where they'll come back to us and keep touching base with us. We're not done being parents when they launch into the real world. When they launch into the world and they're off, they're going to come back and they're going to touch base. But yes, they are going to make their own decisions, and they might make some really poor ones. But we hope that we've developed that relationship where we can help them pick them back up and help put them back on their feet.
Well, and I think we're kind of uncovering another fallacy here. We've, not directly to our faces, but we have been accused of stifling our kids by not letting them have devices. And so when our son grows up, he's going to, like all kids who grow up in a strict home with rules, he's going to rebel, right? Like that's a given. And it's unfortunately unbiblical, and it's simply not true. Raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That is the default position. That doesn't mean that every child will choose to stick with it and choose to follow the path that you've raised them up in. But if you don't, it's going to be way harder for them to stay in a path that they were never taught than to continue what they were trained up to do.
Yes. We like to revert back to what's familiar to us. Just as living things, we like what's familiar. So if that's what's familiar to them, they're going to want to, they might go for the new and exciting for a minute. But then when they have children, when they take things more seriously, as we all do when we become parents, then they're probably going to think back about their childhood experience and what mattered. What were those things that created that safe environment for them?
And if we want to give them the best chance of being able to be responsible and mature in their own management of their time in the future, the time that we have them, so every minute that we have them until they're 18 or 20 or even 25, if that's when they leave the house, every minute that they're with us, their frontal lobe is developing. And we need to give every minute that we have with them, give their brains the best chance of fully forming. And if we do that, they're going to be better capable of making decisions and be self-reflective and notice those differences themselves. Whereas if we are indulgent throughout their childhood years, they'll get out into the world and not be capable of seeing the cause and effect between their actions and the consequences that they're facing because their brain has been deprived of that critical development.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's been interesting just to see how my kids talk differently with their friends. It's like before, they've always had good social relationships, right? They've talked to their friends and they have good experiences. But I feel like there's so much more laughter right now because it's like, well, so last Friday night, we sat down and we were playing games and eating dinner, and then mom started a water fight. And then they just kind of erupt into giggles, and they're just having so much fun thinking about that experience that we had where we started a water fight. And the memories that they're making are so much longer lasting than if we had just turned on a show.
That's a good point. One of the kids, we talked about this last week, like the kids that had seen an impact in their own lives that were asking in devotional. One of them talked about going and doing something with their family. They were like, you could tell they were just aglow about this thing that they got to go do in the real world. It was like a real world activity. Yeah. And I asked him, can you tell me what what TV show you watched a month ago.
No.
Well, I don't know. Do you think you're going to remember this experience in a month or even in a year or 5 years? Yeah. Like these things stick. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
No. And I those are the things that I'm like, okay, you want them to have those memories, those core, and like lots of them. I remember dozens of water fights. A few stand out in, because they were pretty impressive. But I remember lots and lots of water fights. And so I do hope that my kids remember someday that mom started water fights at the dinner table sometimes. Like those are like, I don't know. It's just interesting to see how, and then that what happened in our home ripples out, right? The kids are having these different conversations than they would typically, and they're talking about real life occurrences versus, so I was watching that show. Have you ever seen this show? Have you ever seen that show? You ever played this video game?
So right at the beginning of when we started looking at No Screen November, I came in from working outside doing something, got a little homestead. We're doing lots of construction projects, and I came in and my son was just like, hey, guess what I did? I solved this many, I did this many shrines. I did this and I did this. And his whole sense of accomplishment was wrapped up in what he accomplished on that video game, which is, it's not real. It truly is not real. And I just immediately, I was like, oh my gosh. I was going through like what I had built outside, and like that was real. And what do we want for our kids? Where do we want their sense of accomplishment to come from?
Not from
the
a
real
video
world.
game.
The real world.
Because in 10 years, they won't remember that video game.
Mm-hmm.
They might remember that they put a lot of time into it. But the other interesting thing is I'm excited to see over our Thanksgiving break, we have structured time where they're going to be required to be out helping us. But when my kids are bored, they're outside. So I'm excited to see how much more helpful they are during the break because they're just bored and there's nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some kids in my class already volunteer to come help me move a mulch pile because they're anticipating being bored.
Another one of the benefits.
You never
of this
know.
screen
You
fast.
never know what benefits
your,
might come up.
You might get your mulch pile moved if you have your kids off screen. All right. What if my children or my teenagers just don't want to participate? What if they're just adamant that they're not doing this?
Then we realize that we are the parents. We are the parents and they are the children still. They might be a bigger child. They might even be taller than we are. I have ones that are taller than me now. It's really rude. But they might be taller than us. They might be physically stronger than us, but we are still the parents. And it is our responsibility to do what is best for them. They don't get to make calls for their life. They haven't hit that point yet. We give them some autonomy. That is their teenage years, is learning some autonomy in ways that they are truly ready to be able to make those decisions in a responsible way. They're not ready to make decisions in a responsible way when it comes to anything electronic. They're just not there yet. I
do feel like
we have to be the parent.
Parenting was very hands-on. I don't mean that in spanking. Yes, like 100 years ago, you take the boy out
to
go get a switch. That's not what I'm talking about. But parents were very heavily involved in shaping and guiding and enforcing consequences 100 years ago. But as the society has become more and more lenient and more, we're going to let the kids decide, right? Oh, we'll let them decide if they want to come to this school or if they want to do that school or whatever. We're doing that at a time where our usage of technology is depriving their brain development of the ability to even make those decisions. I mean, a normally regulated child is not developed to be able to do that, which is why parents were very heavily involved 100 years ago. But now they're even less so. They're coming at this with even more of a disadvantage to be able to make those kinds of decisions because we haven't allowed their frontal lobes to develop the way that they were meant to. So be the parent. Be the parent. Your kids aren't running the show. You are. And if that is something that has slipped in your family and it has in ours at different times, it's time to reassert control. Yep. Time to reassert control for their good. They might, 2-year-olds want to run into the street. They don't realize the car coming down the street can kill them. And our teenagers have learned the crossing the street rule, but there are still things that because of where they are that they cannot see. They cannot see the impact of those decisions, not because they're dumb, not because there's something wrong with them, but just because they're young, they're inexperienced, and they need us to yank them out of the middle of the road and bring them to safety, even if they're doing so kicking and screaming.
And if we can give them autonomy we have to purposefully decide, where can they decide? Can they decide what to eat for lunch? Yes. Okay, awesome. They can pick what to eat for lunch. Can they decide not to go out in the middle of the road?
What to wear?
Great. Can they decide what outfit to wear?
It may be wacky.
I don't know. Sometimes. I don't know. But we do have to be very, very careful. I think more and more I see ideology of let them make the decision and I will help them manage the fallout from it. And I understand the thought behind that, and that's fine in certain spaces. But there are some things that are so incredibly important, you just can't give them those decisions. So they're not ready to make decisions about their technology. I would venture that it would be a very, very unique and strong young man or young woman in their teenage years who would be able to make reasonable decisions about their technology. I would say it is a very unique situation and a very, very strong young man or young woman. I would say that the vast majority are not going to be able to do that. Most of them are teenagers have the Superman complex. They just think that it's not going to apply to them. And you have the Superman complex until you realize that you're not Superman. And sometimes you don't realize you're not Superman until you're 35. And we just don't want that lasting thing for them. But what could be amazing is that, your teenager might hate you. They might hate you. And let's be honest, I think every teenager has told their parents some pretty terrible things. But if you can get through that and be okay, be strong and have your own back and know that you're doing the best thing for them. And it's okay if they yell at you. It's okay. They can yell at you. They can be mad. They can throw fits. They can whatever. That's fine. You've got their back. You've got with their best interest in mind. And if you can get them through that healing process, which if your teenager has been on screens their whole life, that is going to be longer than a 3-week process probably. Because that's a long time for them to decompress, to heal. But I love the stories that I hear when families do this with their teenagers who throw giant fits, who scream and yell, who break things in their homes. And then 4 months later, they say, Mom, Dad, thank you so much, because now I'm me again.
That is not a rare occurrence, by the way.
It's not a rare occurrence. And can you imagine that right there? They went from a child who could not handle that important decision to someone who recognized, wow, that was affecting me. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for making that hard decision for me. Thank you for letting me scream and yell at you. Thank you for being my person that I needed you to be and making that hard decision for me so that I could get myself out of a hard situation that I didn't know I was in. Right? We pull them out of hard friendship. Like if they're in a bad group of friends, we're going to pull them out of that bad group of friends. There's all these situations where we protect them. But when it comes to screens, we feel like if we do so, we're being mean. We're not being mean. We have our kids' best interest at heart, and we need to be careful with that. We need to be careful with that responsibility. So if your teenager doesn't want to do it and you feel like they should do it, you take away their phone. You take away their screens. And we locked them in safes. We locked everything in a safe. Power cords, devices, they're all in a safe. And we're the only ones that have the code. So my kids can't have access to it. It's not like they can just sneak it because they found it in a drawer or in a closet. We locked them away because we didn't want them to even have that temptation, right? So you have to figure out what that looks like for you, but don't just assume, oh, they said no, I guess we're not doing it.
Yeah.
I think that's so inappropriate. And I think it's a very dangerous spot to be in with your teenager, because sometimes it can mean that we're burnt out as a parent. And if you're burnt out as a parent, find a way to heal that in you. Find a way to find some more motivation, because you've got years left to get your kid where they need to be so they can be ready to make some of those really important decisions. So don't step away from that too soon. You've got responsibility there.
Thank you. Amen to all that. One other quick concern I want to address before moving on is when you're dealing, a lot of times people will think, well, if we use interactive gaming systems, so like the Wii or the Switch or a lot of these, the Xbox will have Just Dance, right? So you're getting up and dancing while you're looking at the screen. Mm-hmm. That solves the sedentary issue that comes along with screens, but it doesn't solve the nervous system dysregulation. It doesn't solve the fight or flight. So again, there's way more and probably even worse impacts of inappropriate screen usage than just we're sitting around being lazy. So don't don't get sucked into that gimmick. The video game manufacturers know that that's a common concern, and that's how they get us, and they've gotten us there before. Okay. So we don't, at this point, we're kind of at the end. We've just finished our Thanksgiving break. So we didn't get to see and get kid feedback during this last week. The last feedback that we got, we're now, 3 weeks in to the fast. And the last week and a half of that, we have not interacted with our students. We've seen some improvements in our own kids and everything else. So we don't have a whole lot, but I can just imagine how much better things are getting. And as I try and envision, taking those initial benefits and compounding them, doubling that, and then extending that, hopefully as people do this and extend it, months and even years into the future, it's a bright picture. But I did want to spend a second and talk about, from that first week and a half, what are some of the things that our teachers at school have noticed, or that you've noticed as a teacher?
So some of the things that I've noticed for my students, Focus has been so much better. I had so much fun looking through my grade book and realizing, oh my goodness, these kids that have, some of these kids have been really good. Our goal for math is that they do a lesson a day. Some of them have consistently been doing a lesson a day. And all of a sudden I got 1.5 lessons a day. Wow. That's amazing. I'm having less card color changes, which means that their behavior is good and they're following the rules and they're not being disruptive and they're staying focused on the task at hand. Their ability to memorize has increased, which is amazing and wonderful, because that is directly in her book. She talks directly about how memorization is affected by screens. I've seen kids who have had mental blocks for themselves start to overcome some of those mental blocks. I've had more work completed in spelling and in language arts. I've had more work completed. I've had kids who have had, kids that have just had specific things that they've been struggling with, and all of a sudden they're starting to overcome it. They've been struggling with certain things since the beginning of the school year, and all of a sudden their brain has enough bandwidth, I guess, and that enough blood in that prefrontal lobe where they're able to start overcoming those things. We've been having really good conversations. I'm super, super excited for this next week to see what it's going to look like, right? This last week of November, this last week of our fast, to see, now that these kids have been screen-free for 3 weeks, what can they accomplish? What can they do now that their brains are reset? Now that so many of them have the benefit of everything being regulated. I'm super excited.
Okay. And most of our teachers are noticing similar things. At school, when students turn in math work, the one thing I've noticed, so I don't teach full-time this year, but I help out in different classes for math. And when a student turns in an assignment, if they miss problems, the next day they're meant to correct it. We call them corrections. So I've noticed just the number of corrections that they're having to do the next day take a nosedive. Normally, I go through and I help them work through corrections, and I'm finding myself getting done in half the time that it was taking because there just aren't as many. So they're able to focus and they're more accurate in the work that they're doing, which also leads into speeding everything up and all of these things. So,
and we haven't done a full.
That's after 11 days of a screen fast.
And we need to get in and check test scores and see how those have been affected. We need to do all of that. We haven't had a chance to do that yet. Obviously, we're going to wait until that screen fast is done, and then we're going to really dive into that. And I cannot wait. I'm so excited to see, because I can tell already that the growth is going to be significant, and I can't wait to show that and highlight that for our parents.
So now last week we talked about, preparing. What's your plan going to be? How much or how little screen time are you going to implement long term? If you missed that, again, go back and listen to the prior ones that you may have missed. But I want to go through and talk about some of the basic house rules that are just good, for lack of a better term, screen hygiene. So the first one is artificial brightness. So what is it about bright lights and the time of day that we're exposed to bright lights? What are those impacts?
So our optic nerve, right? It processes a lot and it is connected to our nervous system. So there's all of that dysregulation, but there's also melatonin levels. Our screens are high in blue light, and blue light is light that we get from the sun. And our brains are regulated according to when we have blue light, right? So theoretically, we should be experiencing the highest melatonin levels right when that sun is setting, and then throughout the night, And then we should have our melatonin levels decrease and we're bright and awake and ready to go in the morning time. When we're on those screens, when the blue light is the brightest is not naturally when the sun is the brightest. And so you might be receiving noonday sun at 8:00 at night and your brain's like, I'm sorry, what? Am I supposed to be waking up? Am I supposed to be sleeping? I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing. So it throws everything out of whack for your melatonin. And there's just a lot incorporated in that's just not going to be regulated.
So the recommendation is eliminate light at night or screen time at night altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't do it. When you're watching TV, put the ambient room light comparable to the TV light. So if the room's dark, turn the brightness down on the TV and watch it from farther away, 2.5 to 3 times the distance between you and the TV compared to the size of the screen. So that's a good one. I mean, that's common like that. How many houses in America just stay up late watching TV, but getting rid of light at night.
And even that thought of turn the lights out so we can watch TV. Nope. Make the light in the room match the brightness of the TV.
I love a dark room when the TV's on. Anyways, good changes. It's going to be worth it, right? Okay. Number 2, bedroom is a sleep sanctuary. That's the primary purpose of a bedroom. So there should be no electronics in the bedroom whatsoever. That has been kind of common wisdom for a long time. A lot of us ignore it. We have at certain times in the past too.
And
but still an important
hard
reminder.
With the handheld, with the laptop, with the phone, with the iPad. We feel like those are okay to store in bedrooms. They're not.
Okay, the other recommended house rule is to have a family wired workstation. So a single spot in the house where all computer and screen time work is done. This is recommended for children and for adults. Now, this is important for, eliminating the temptation for unsavory media altogether, but there's more to it than that. We've talked before about keeping screen-free times and zones. It's a lot easier if the only time you're on a computer, it's a lot easier to leave it. You don't want to sit at a desktop forever, right? It's a lot more comfortable to sit on your couch and pull open your laptop or your iPad or something like that. So you're a lot more likely to just get in, get the work done that you need done, and then get off and not just be on your screen constantly. So that's one of the benefits. But why wired? What's the big deal about wired?
So a lot of it is the electromagnetic fields. And then that our bodies are experiencing. I was blown away when I read through this part of her book. I did not know this. She just asks, did you know a ton of times? Did you know that other countries such as France, Italy, Sweden, Germany, and Australia are concerned about exposing children to EMFs, electromagnetic fields, and that some countries have outlawed Wi-Fi in schools, daycares, and preschools entirely? I sure didn't. Did you know the official recommendation from the American Academy of Environmental Medicine is that children use wired-only internet access? I did not know that. Did you know the American Academy of Pediatrics has written several letters to the FCC asking for updated acceptable radiation exposure levels for children because of the dramatic growth of wireless communication, stating that children are not little adults and are disproportionately affected by all environmental exposures? These are things that we're not aware of. These are things that are not publicized. These are things that my pediatrician sure didn't tell me. But Wi-Fi is an issue. It is an issue it can be a huge issue with our children.
I like how she goes through the science on the effects of Wi-Fi radiation is still pretty new. So the Wi-Fi everywhere, like being able to walk into McDonald's or Home Depot and get Wi-Fi access is a relatively new phenomena. So, she talks about is it conclusive? No. But if damage is plausible, then caution is recommended until the science does become conclusive. So is it plausible? So Wi-Fi signals, it's forms of radiation is what it is. Now, the light emits radiation. We need that for our plants to grow and for us to be healthy. Lights themselves, heat is radiation. So all of these things are, not every form of radiation is bad, but where it is a type of radiation, it's a type of microwave. These are very short wavelengths, and we know that microwaves can be damaged. That's why you got the little grid thing on the front of your microwave, right? So you're not exposed to those waves. Then if it's plausible that could be hurting us in some way, we should err on the side of caution. And that's just not what we're doing right now, at least not in this country. And that's why they're recommending, that's why these countries are doing that, because in the absence of knowing for sure that it's absolutely safe, let's pretend like it
protect our
might
children.
not be, because it'll be decades, if not generations, before we see the full impacts. If these waves are causing cellular mutations or genetic mutations that we can't see and detect, we may not see the impact of that for a couple generations down the road. So in the meantime, let's err on the side of caution. I love the way that she said that. It's not conclusive, but
And I think it's also important to note, like, it's costing our school systems millions, if not billions of dollars to utilize handheld devices in each classroom with the Wi-Fi to support it. It's costing so much money for our school systems. Imagine what would happen if that money was rerouted and used some other way. If it was rerouted to good play structures, if it was rerouted to adequate air conditioning, clean water in our schools. Like, there's some basic needs that are not being met in some schools.
More teachers.
Or
and a
more
better
teachers. Let's pay our
student-to-teacher
teachers better.
ratio.
Let's educate our teachers. Let's make, anyways, there's just so much more that we could do with that money that research has shown for long times, for like longitudinal studies going back hundreds of years, shows that it does help children. There's that. And then there's, maybe it might help. Maybe if we follow the research, no, but they're going to give me a kickback if I do. Like, follow the money. It's just, it's very interesting to note that so much money is being used in that way. And there's mounting evidence that it looks like it's hurting kids.
So when I go back to this idea of creating a family workstation, that means, I normally come home, I pull up my laptop on the kitchen table and I do my work. So this is going to require, my immediate thought is this is going to be inconvenient to set this up. Where are we going to put this thing? What's that going to look like for my ability to get work done? But again, in the long term, once we figure out that uncomfortable stuff, what's the real downside? I'm going to be motivated to get done what I need to get done and only get done what I need to get done so I can get off of that uncomfortable wired workstation. I'll spend less time on screens. I'm not going to be walking around carrying it in my lap or having it up in front of my face. And if it's wired, if there is some harm that's coming from these Wi-Fi signals, we're eliminating a lot of that happening in our home. So again, a little bit inconvenient up front, but potential upside is enormous. So push past the discomfort. I know change is uncomfortable, but stay focused on those long-term gains. All right, so some other recommendations for house rules is if you are going to implement any kind of interactive screen time, match it with exercise time, right? It has to, if you're going to have 15 minutes, make them go run around the block for 15 minutes or something like that. And that helps create a culture of screen time as a privilege, right? And it should only, if you are going to have any kind of interactive screen time, it should only come after chores are done, homework's done. It shouldn't be during the weekdays. And if they're getting all those things done without temper tantrums and fighting and arguing and all those other things, it is a privilege and it's not a right. So talk to me. So she also recommends having screen-free times and screen-free places. What were some of those recommendations that she gave?
So she talks about, really it's those times when typically conversation would occur. So meal times, in the car, when you're sitting around, maybe before school, maybe after school, those times when they might need to decompress and tell you what's going on. Anytime when you're on a family outing, probably don't want to have those screens because they're going to.
Except for road trips, right?
No, not even road trips. Man, not even road trips. Some great conversations can happen. Holidays, birthdays, those times when you really want to make sure that you're there to connect with your child and to have good communication and strengthen those relationships, just have those be screen-free zones. I think, did you talk about the kitchen being, I don't remember exactly, but like for me, I'm like, I kind of feel like the kitchen needs to be a screen-free zone. This is the place you can come and we'll be cooking and we'll be whatever, and you can all have meaningful conversations throughout that time. So bedrooms for sure, for screen-free zones. But then if there's other places in your home where you feel like conversation is going to be stunted because there is a screen, take that screen out and just have it be family time.
All right, awesome. So let's transition over as kind of our final topic of this series, talking about the chapter in the book is called School Daze, D-A-Z-E. And she kind of just talks about a lot of the issues with the way that we view school in general in this country. So going back to kind of what I was talking about earlier, we see more time in school, right? We're falling further behind. So that means we need to get kids into school earlier. When they're in school, they need to spend more time learning, and we're taking away recess time. So what we get is kids who spend tons of time inside studying, not getting up and moving around or playing. They're also being given more access to screens during that time, which hypes them and hyper-arouses and hyper-stimulates them. Their time sitting is increased, and then they go home and have hours of homework each day. When what kids need for good development is exactly the opposite. They need more time to be physical, more time to be active, more time interacting with the real world, and less time in front of screens and sitting. There's also this idea that more and more of the research for high school projects is happening online. E-readers are the new big thing. What's the deal with digital text and comprehension and retention?
So when it comes to digital, we want to multitask. And so we won't stay focused on the actual stuff that we're supposed to be reading. So it promotes skimming rather than actually in-depth reading. It promotes multitasking. So they're not actually staying focused on what they're supposed to be doing. And multitasking, like they're losing 15 minutes every time that they go to something else. It takes them 15 minutes to be able to really get back into the topic that they were studying or researching. And their comprehension levels drop as far as what they're retaining from what they're reading. So if they can read a physical copy of something, a physical textbook, a physical book, a physical encyclopedia, something like that, they retain a lot more. They study without all the multitasking, so they're going to accomplish a lot more in a shorter period of time.
When you're dealing with bright screens, especially, your brain is having blood flow removed from the parts that allow you to focus, memorize, and retain information. And we're expected to retain it better somehow that way. But even e-readers, retention is terrible on e-readers compared to a physical book. That has been studied multiple times, and there's lots of ideas for why that might be. But the fact is that an e-reader is not really any better as far as comprehension goes. Real books are where it's at.
It's not better than, the screen. You definitely want to go physical copies.
So it's interesting, she talks about there's a push to put more and more electronic smart boards, right? Or more and more videos and more visually stimulating material into classrooms. What were some of the things our teachers were talking about at staff meeting just this last time about that very thing?
So it was just interesting. We have our science and history lessons come from an online curriculum. And so a lot of us would have the lesson up, and we'd go, there's a lot of picture images, and then there's some videos and stuff throughout. Typically it's pictures though, and very limited videos. And so they would have the whole screen up, and then they would show the pictures as they went. And they talked about how they just all naturally stopped doing that because
before
the No Screen November, they just stopped doing that because they're like, as soon as I turn that TV on, I lose them. They won't pay attention to me. Whereas if I teach the lesson and then I pull it up for a video and then I turn it off again and they're back with me, their attention's on me, on what I'm talking about, versus trying to just look at the picture. It's just interesting how just looking at the pictures that were going along with the lesson was causing so much of an attention issue. And I think across the board, every single one of us at our branch of LYA had stopped doing that because we had noticed the attention issues.
Well, and in general, there's this big push to push more and more technology into classrooms. And every time I hear the word reinvent or reimagine, it makes me cringe, right? We wanted to reimagine the police, and the cities that have done that have turned into crime-ridden, Gotham cities. And it's not been good. And when it comes to teaching and pedagogy is something that has been discussed and studied for millennia. And some of the best people who came up with some of the best ideas even today were, this is from ancient Greece, a lot of these ideas. So we know how to teach. We know how to teach and educate kids. And so trying to go reimagine education with new technology is not only unnecessary, but it's untried, it's unproven. And it turns out in a lot of cases, it's causing a lot of harm. So, new is not always better. We need to go back to the tried and true method of teaching. And then if we're going to try something new, it should come after lots and lots and lots of time and study. Okay. Handwriting though.
So handwriting on that same thought chain It is so incredibly important for kids to be writing, to be learning to write. I loved this whole section in her book. I listened to it, and it just is so important. So sensory integration specialists and child development experts assert that children who can't handprint well don't learn to read easily because they don't have as strong a visual motor imprint for letter recognition. In contrast, practicing and becoming proficient in printing makes both printing and reading more fluid and automatic, freeing up mental energy to work on other subjects like math and spelling. And then it also talks about how printing and cursive writing stimulate the brain and mind in ways that typing does not, including hand-eye coordination, self-discipline, attention to detail, and global engagement of thinking, language, and working memory areas. It is so important for students to handwrite. They need to handwrite. They need to learn that level of detail. And I do find that the students that tend to really, really struggle with writing are the ones that struggle with reading. They struggle with anything. Attention to detail is so, they want to do it fast and snappy, and they don't want to take their time and put their very best effort into it. And so I just think it's a world where it's very easy to take the easy way out. And I even found myself in some parent-teacher conferences this last go-round saying, you know what, I can kind of see how talk-to-text might be helpful in that student. And I'm cringing at myself. I'm like, I'm so sorry. That was pre this knowledge me. And I'm at the point where I'm like, you know what? I teach 4th and 5th graders. They need to handwrite everything. They really do. That's what's best for their brains. That is what's best for their development. And if that's what the research for sensory integration specialists and that child development experts are saying, I'm good. That's good. I'll do that.
Well, and nobody's, saying that the idea that, well, this child just has terrible penmanship, so they should just do everything typed. First of all, we all had terrible penmanship at one point. None of us were born with beautiful flowing script. It's a development. It's something that we all learn, and some pick it up quicker than others, but that's true for every subject, right? We all have different strengths and weaknesses. And so also, what are we teaching our kids by saying, oh, it's hard for you, just give up? What a terrible mentality to instill.
Yeah.
Just give up. You're never going to be good at this. That's awful. Of course. No, you double down and you master it. You work your tail off and you master it. That is overcoming. That builds confidence. Telling them, yeah, you're just really bad at this. We're not going to make you handwrite. What is that going to do for their confidence and their ability to overcome challenges in the future?
Well, and it is an interesting thing because I've done a lot of research into dyslexia and dysgraphia. And through my learning more about those things, I found that I am dysgraphic, and I did not realize I was dysgraphic. But it did play a role in my handwriting. It did play a role in even my piano playing. It played a role in my life, and it was very interesting for me to think. And I have lots of journals because I wrote lots of journals. I wrote a lot, handwritten, but I can pinpoint through those journals right about when I started to really care about my penmanship. And I cared enough that I wrote on everything, everywhere, because I was like, I am going to have legible handwriting. And so I do remember writing on everything because I was like, now I care. Now I want it. I had a friend who had beautiful penmanship, and I just remember looking at one of her notes that she was taking in primary, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. I need to do that. And so I remember I was 11, and that was when I really, really started caring about my penmanship and when I really worked hard to master. And now my penmanship, it's interesting because I'll tell people that I'm dysgraphic, and they're like, oh, but your handwriting looks okay. Or they'll say it looks good. I'm like, okay, it looks okay. They're like, no, it looks fine. It looks great. And I still limit it in my own brain, but we do care eventually, and I could master it. It just meant it was harder for me. Mm-hmm. And is it perfect? Is it just like I have another friend, she writes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it looks like you just printed that out, like typed it out. No, I'm not there. That's not where my handwriting will ever be. But
no, it could be.
Is it? Well, that's true. Maybe it could if I worked hard enough. I haven't gotten to the point where I've cared that much, but I can write things down. It's legible. It's well read. Like everyone can read what I'm saying, and it is neat. It is neat. I can write on the board, and no kids are going like, what in the world did you write, Sister Hayes? So I think it's just really important. They do need to have that desire, but they can do it. They can do it. It's not something that we should ever limit our children on.
So we could go on and talk about this forever. I honestly, when we started, didn't think we'd have enough to really get through the first episode, and we've now made it to 5 rather long episodes. If you stuck with us through it to this point, kudos to you. A couple of other things I wanted to touch on very briefly, and then we're going to wrap up here. But so we have also kind of heard that there's a difference between audio and visual learners. Some people just struggle to hear and learn audibly. Now, that is something that we need to know and acknowledge as teachers. But again, it kind of goes along with the same handwriting thing. Just because something is difficult for you doesn't mean that you shouldn't work on it and improve that skill. So trying to take everything visual through media and screens and videos is just helping those who struggle with learning auditorily. We're helping keep them from developing that skill. Mm-hmm. So what do we do about all of this? If you're in a school where there's lots of screen usage, you're still in control. You are the parent. Go get whatever accommodations that you need. Homeschool is a fantastic option. If you're already homeschooling, there's a surge in homeschooling right now. And I know a lot of that is taking place on online programs. Homeschooling offline is fantastic. So if that's kind of what got you started, that's great. And maybe it's been working great, but maybe it's time to up level, right? To go to the offline homeschooling. And there's probably people in your area that can help you do that. But when it comes to school, keeping these things in mind is important. And if you can apply the same principles to your school and your kids' education that we've been talking about at home, your kid's going to be that much better off. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. I hope this series has been helpful. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We have learned a ton. I hope you have too. And if you're hearing this and you haven't started a screen reset yet, I invite you to go ahead and get started. It's not too late. Now, I also said that this was going to be the last in this series, and it is. I'm going to go back to kind of my normal podcast episode structure, but in a couple of weeks, we are going to come back and share some experiences from our parents. We're going to solicit and ask all of our school parents if they've seen any benefits to write a short story of that down and share it with us. And then we're going to in turn hopefully come and have several dozen of those that we can read and just share with you, so that if you're finding yourself lacking in motivation or struggling, you have some solid examples to look to help kind of stiffen your spine and help you face whatever struggles you're facing as you're dealing with technology in your own home. So again, thank you for joining us, and best wishes to you for a happier future for you and your family. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Abide in Liberty. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and share this with friends and family. In the meantime, keep up with the show online at abideinliberty.com. Also, if you'd like to help our K-12 bless and educate more families, contact us by visiting libertyyouthacademy.org. Until next time, be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, and be strong.